3 minutes after the final review meeting ended inside Clarence House, a royal printing directive quietly moved through palace channels, one that reportedly erased Prince Andrew's name from every future coronation program reprint. Courtiers froze, staff whispered, and according to multiple royal insiders, the order did not come from aides or advisors. It came directly from King Charles himself, in what many now describe as the coldest act of royal severance since the aftermath of the sun-drenched coronation of 2023. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the alleged decision so explosive was not simply the removal itself, but the speed and secrecy surrounding it. Reports suggest the directive emerged from a tightly controlled emergency discussion held late inside Clarence House, where senior aides, ceremonial advisors, and trusted administrative officials were quietly summoned with almost no notice. According to palace administrative streams ranging from printing contractors to security coordination staff, the atmosphere inside those meetings was unusually tense even by royal standards. No phones, no unnecessary movement, no leaks. At least, that was the plan. Because within hours, whispers had already begun moving through the corridors of Buckingham Palace that something unprecedented was unfolding behind closed doors. Various interpretations of the meeting described King Charles as physically weary but unusually decisive. Sources close to royal operations claim revised program drafts had already been prepared before the final review even began, suggesting this may not have been a sudden emotional reaction at all, but rather the culmination of a much longer internal strategy. And that is precisely what has stunned royal historians, now weighing the symbolic consequences of the move. Coronation programs are not treated as disposable souvenirs inside the House of Windsor. They are historical artifacts, institutional records, permanent ceremonial documents preserved inside royal archives beside state papers, succession decrees, and letters tied to the sacred geography of the British monarchy itself. To reportedly erase Prince Andrew from future reprints was, in the eyes of many insiders, not merely embarrassing, it was a form of royal excommunication carried out through bureaucratic warfare. And yet, perhaps the most chilling part of the entire episode was the silence that followed. Palace officials were allegedly warned not to discuss the directive outside tightly restricted circles. Reprint teams working with archival materials were reportedly instructed to make the revisions quietly and without annotation, ensuring that no public acknowledgement would accompany the changes. The Crown, as it has done for centuries, would simply move forward as though the alteration had always existed. That cold institutional instinct has fueled growing whispers that this operation was years in the making. Because despite public appearances of fragile family unity following Queen Elizabeth II's death, insiders whisper that tension surrounding Prince Andrew never truly disappeared from the heart of the monarchy. They merely went underground, buried beneath ceremonial smiles, carefully staged appearances, and the desperate effort to project continuity during King Charles's increasingly difficult reign. Andrew's allies, according to multiple reports, believed there remained an invisible line the king would never cross. Titles could be limited, public duties could disappear, military honors could quietly fade into the background, but total ceremonial erasure from an event as historically significant as the coronation? That, many believed, was unthinkable, especially given Charles's long reputation for avoiding direct confrontation with family members during moments of institutional vulnerability. But the reality now emerging from palace circles paints a far harsher picture, one in which the monarchy's survival instinct has become stronger than sentiment, stronger than loyalty, perhaps even stronger than blood itself. And behind that growing realization lies an even darker question now circulating among royal observers and former palace staff alike. Why now? Why reopen one of the monarchy's deepest wounds during a period already overshadowed by illness, uncertainty, and rising pressure surrounding the future of the crown? Insiders claim the answer may have very little to do with punishment alone, because removing a name from history was never just about optics. It was about erasing a claim to royal relevance before the monarchy entered its most fragile chapter yet. What appeared to the public as a simple commemorative program was, behind palace walls, treated as something far more sacred, a permanent historical artifact tied to the legitimacy of the crown itself. And now, according to reports circulating through royal administrative circles, Prince Andrew's place inside that document had become politically radioactive. To understand why the alleged removal sent such shockwaves through the monarchy, it is necessary to understand what coronation programs truly represent within the House of Windsor. They are not casual ceremonial pamphlets designed only for tourists and collectors. They are institutional records preserved alongside the official memory of the crown itself. Copies are reportedly archived within Westminster Abbey's ceremonial collections, retained in royal libraries, and cross-referenced with state documentation that stretches back generations. Every title, every procession order, every appearance inside those pages becomes part of the monarchy's carefully protected historical narrative. And according to insiders familiar with palace protocol, altering those records after publication is almost unheard of, unless the institution believes its own long-term survival requires it. That is why the growing whispers surrounding Prince Andrew's removal have become so politically explosive. Because this was not simply about embarrassment, it was about legitimacy, about who remains permanently connected to the sacred machinery of monarchy, and who quietly becomes separated from it over time. Royal commentators, including figures linked to the Times and Tatler, have increasingly suggested that King Charles has spent much of his reign attempting to reinforce what aides allegedly call a streamlined monarchy, a leaner, more disciplined institution capable of surviving public distrust, generational change, and relentless scrutiny in the digital age. But the reality behind that phrase, according to insiders, may be far harsher than the public ever imagined. For decades, Prince Andrew occupied a position of immense ceremonial visibility within royal life. During state occasions, diplomatic receptions, military events, and jubilees, he stood not at the edges of royal power, but directly within its inner framework. There was once a time when Andrew was viewed as one of the monarchy's most forceful representatives abroad, a figure deeply embedded in the operational structure of the firm itself. That history makes the current situation even more devastating, because the palace is not merely distancing itself from a disgraced figure. Reports suggest it is attempting to redefine the official historical memory of Charles's reign before future constitutional pressures make such revisions impossible. And that fear, the fear of future scandal contaminating the crown, reportedly hangs over every discussion now unfolding inside palace walls. Insiders whisper that senior royal strategists have become increasingly alarmed by the possibility that unresolved controversies surrounding Andrew could overshadow King Charles's already fragile reign, particularly while the monarch continues facing ongoing health concerns since early 2024. Within that context, the monarchy's instinct for preservation appears to have intensified dramatically. The institution is no longer reacting emotionally. It is calculating, coldly, surgically. And according to various interpretations from former palace staff, that mindset has triggered comparisons to some of the most painful exclusions in royal history. Historians have quietly referenced earlier constitutional crises where controversial royals were gradually erased from the ceremonial center of the monarchy following scandals, abdications, or public disgrace. The parallels are impossible to ignore. The crown survives, insiders claim, by reducing emotional chaos into administrative procedure. Titles disappear, portraits move, invitations stop arriving, records are amended. Then eventually silence replaces presence altogether. What makes this alleged program revision especially chilling is that it appears to follow that exact institutional pattern, not with public confrontation but through quiet bureaucratic precision designed to protect legacy at all costs. And perhaps that is what has unsettled even longtime royal observers the most. Because according to reports emerging from palace circles, this was never simply a reaction to public opinion. It was a warning about the monarchy's future direction under Charles, and eventually, under William. A signal that the old rules of private protection may no longer apply when the stability of the crown itself is perceived to be at risk. Yet insiders claim the true shock wasn't the removal itself, it was how aggressively the palace moved to execute it without warning Andrew first. According to various interpretations from palace insiders, Prince Andrew did not immediately understand what had happened. At first, staff reportedly assumed it was a printing correction. But as revised drafts circulated privately among senior aides, the devastating reality became impossible to ignore. the Duke of York was being quietly written out of the monarchy's ceremonial memory. The confusion, according to reports emerging from inside royal circles, spread rapidly through Andrew's already diminished inner network. Sources familiar with administrative exchanges claim aides at Royal Lodge initially believed the altered coronation references were temporary edits connected to formatting adjustments or archival standardization. That assumption reportedly lasted only a matter of hours, because once the revised program drafts were examined more closely, the pattern became unmistakable. Mentions had not simply been reduced. They had allegedly been excised with deliberate precision. Entire ceremonial acknowledgments tied to Andrew's former position inside the royal hierarchy appeared to have vanished, as though palace officials were attempting to slowly dissolve his institutional footprint altogether. What made the situation emotionally devastating for the Duke, insiders whisper, was the growing realization that no explanation was immediately offered. No warning. No private reassurance from Buckingham Palace. No effort to soften the symbolic blow. And inside the House of Windsor, silence often carries more meaning than words ever could. According to former staff members cited in royal commentary circles, the lack of communication was interpreted not as oversight, but as punishment. A message delivered through absence. A cold demonstration that the monarchy had entered a new and far less forgiving phase under King Charles's reign. Reports suggest tense conversations soon unfolded behind the gates of Royal Lodge, where Andrew has reportedly become increasingly isolated from the operational core of royal life. Different interpretations of those exchanges describe a duke who was less angry than stunned, genuinely convinced that while his public role had collapsed, his brother would continue protecting him privately from total institutional humiliation. That belief, insiders claim, had shaped Andrew's understanding of his position ever since the fallout from previous scandals pushed him out of public duties. He reportedly believed there remained a boundary Charles would never cross. But according to palace whispers now circulating more aggressively than ever, that boundary may no longer exist. Even Sarah Ferguson, long viewed as one of Andrew's most loyal defenders despite years of controversy surrounding the couple, is rumored to have been deeply unsettled by the sudden escalation. Sources close to royal social circles claim Ferguson understood immediately what many others around Andrew did not, that this was not merely about one program revision. It was about the monarchy redefining who belonged inside its future, and who would remain trapped inside its past. And that distinction carries enormous psychological weight within a family where relevance is inseparable from identity itself. Inside palace corridors, the atmosphere reportedly grew increasingly icy as the implications became clearer. Royal staff described a climate of extreme caution, where even lower-level aides allegedly avoided discussing Andrew openly, for fear of becoming entangled in sensitive internal disputes. According to insiders familiar with Buckingham Palace operations, there was a growing sense that senior officials were executing instructions with mechanical discipline rather than personal emotion. That shift matters, because historically, even during periods of royal scandal, there often remained quiet channels of informal compassion operating behind the scenes. But now, according to multiple interpretations from royal observers, the institution appears to be prioritizing survival above sentiment in a way not seen since the aftermath of earlier constitutional crises. And perhaps most haunting of all was the realization slowly forming around Andrew himself. Reports suggest he began understanding that this was not a temporary distancing strategy designed to calm public pressure. It was something far more permanent, a restructuring of royal memory, a deliberate narrowing of who the monarchy intended future generations to associate with the sacred continuity of the crown. The party, insiders whisper, was truly over, not with a dramatic public confrontation, but through bureaucratic silence so ruthless it barely needed words at all. Yet even as Andrew's allies struggled to comprehend the scale of the humiliation unfolding around them, some palace insiders were already warning that the revisions represented only the visible surface of a much deeper internal campaign. Because behind the quiet document changes, the sealed meetings, and the institutional coldness, another operation was reportedly beginning to take shape inside the monarchy's inner machinery. But the brutal revision campaign was only one piece of a much larger operation, unfolding behind closed palace doors. For years, royal observers believed King Charles's vision of a slimmed-down monarchy was mostly symbolic rhetoric. But insiders now whisper that the removal of Andrew's name marked the moment the doctrine became operational, a surgical restructuring of royal legitimacy executed while the king battles illness and mounting institutional pressure. Inside Buckingham Palace, the phrase slimmed-down monarchy has reportedly circulated for decades, long before Charles ever ascended the throne. At first, many dismissed it as little more than modern public relations language, a softer way of presenting budget awareness, reduced ceremonial excess, and a smaller working royal roster designed to satisfy public expectations in a changing Britain. But according to palace administrative sources now speaking in increasingly cautious tones, the meaning behind the doctrine has evolved into something far more severe. It is no longer simply about appearances, it is about control, preservation, survival. And in recent months, insiders claim the monarchy's old guard has begun enforcing that vision with a level of institutional discipline that has left even veteran courtiers shaken. The alleged removal of Prince Andrew from future coronation program reprints is now being viewed by royal historians not as an isolated humiliation, but as the clearest evidence yet that Charles's long-discussed restructuring plans have entered an aggressive new phase. Reports suggest palace administrative teams were quietly instructed to conduct broader reviews of ceremonial references, archival mentions, and future state documentation connected to figures considered politically damaging to the institution's long-term stability. The operation, according to various interpretations from royal insiders, resembles less a family dispute and more a form of bureaucratic warfare carried out through paperwork, protocol, and historical revision. And behind that strategy stands a brutal guiding principle now whispered more openly inside palace corridors than ever before: the firm before the family. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, senior aides increasingly believe the monarchy can no longer afford emotional compromise while facing simultaneous crises involving public trust, generational transition, financial scrutiny, and King Charles's ongoing health concerns since early 2024. Within that climate, the Crown's instinct for self-preservation appears to have hardened dramatically. The institution is narrowing itself around figures viewed as essential to its future, and quietly distancing anyone perceived as a threat to that carefully managed continuity. Prince William, according to multiple palace observers, is believed to have strongly supported tougher internal measures long before the program controversy became public. Various interpretations of his position suggest the Prince of Wales has grown increasingly determined to protect the monarchy from carrying unresolved scandals into the next reign. Those familiar with the Duchy of Cornwall's rigorous standards often describe William as deeply focused on institutional credibility, particularly among younger generations already skeptical of hereditary privilege. And within that context, insiders whisper that Andrew's continued symbolic presence inside major royal documents had become increasingly difficult for the future king to justify. The comparisons now being drawn by historians are striking. Several royal commentators have referenced the quiet administrative cleanups that followed the abdication crisis of 1936, when controversial royal figures were gradually pushed away from the ceremonial center of monarchy in order to restore public confidence. The method was not explosive confrontation. It was controlled isolation. Invitations disappeared. Titles became less visible. Official references narrowed over time until absence itself became normalized. According to palace sources, many now believe Andrew's situation is unfolding through that same cold institutional playbook, not through dramatic exile, but through carefully measured erasure executed piece by piece. What makes the situation especially devastating is the speed at which perceptions inside the monarchy appear to have changed. Reports suggest Andrew is increasingly viewed not as a wounded family member requiring protection, but as a long-term liability to legacy preservation during one of the most fragile periods of the modern crown. And for Charles, that pressure may be even more psychologically brutal than outsiders realize. Because insiders claim the king understands that every decision made now will shape not only his own reign, but the stability of William's future monarchy as well. That realization, according to various palace interpretations, may explain why recent internal meetings have reportedly become so tense, so strategic, and so unforgiving. Because while the public still sees isolated incidents and scattered controversies, those operating inside the royal machine allegedly see something much larger unfolding: a controlled restructuring of power designed to secure the institution before another storm arrives. And according to multiple palace sources, one private exchange between Charles and William may have sealed Andrew's fate permanently. Behind the polished public image of royal unity, reports suggest Prince William has grown increasingly resolute about protecting the future crown from lingering scandals tied to the past. And insiders now believe the Coronation program decision carried the unmistakable fingerprints of the heir to the throne. For years, Prince William carefully cultivated an image of restraint, measured, controlled, patient. Even during periods of enormous family turmoil, the Prince of Wales rarely allowed frustration to spill into public view. But according to multiple palace insiders, something has shifted behind the scenes as the monarchy moves deeper into one of the most uncertain chapters of the modern royal era. Those familiar with internal royal discussions claim William has become increasingly focused on what aides allegedly call constitutional durability. The idea that the crown must emerge from the chaos of the past decade with absolute clarity about who represents its future and who does not. Within that framework, insiders whisper that Prince Andrew's continued symbolic presence inside major ceremonial records had become more than uncomfortable. It had become strategically dangerous. Reports suggest William has quietly pushed for firmer distancing measures for months, particularly as concerns surrounding public trust among younger generations continue to grow. Palace advisors allegedly fear that unresolved royal controversies now carry a far greater threat in the age of social media, political instability, and declining institutional loyalty than they did during previous reigns. And according to sources close to royal administrative planning, William has repeatedly emphasized the importance of what insiders describe as clean constitutional optics, a monarchy streamlined not only in size but in perception. The logic behind that strategy is brutally simple. Future stability, according to palace thinking, may depend on removing every possible distraction capable of weakening confidence in the crown before William himself eventually ascends the throne. That growing sense of urgency reportedly strengthened the alliance between Charles and William in ways few outsiders fully understood at first. What some royal commentators have now started referring to as the heirs' accord was not, according to insiders, a formal agreement, but rather a shared understanding quietly forged through crisis, illness, and mounting institutional pressure since early 2024. Sources familiar with palace operations claim father and son have increasingly aligned behind closed doors on one central principle. The monarchy can no longer afford divided messaging when its survival depends on public confidence. And within that strategic shift, Prince Andrew's unresolved legacy allegedly became one of the most sensitive issues confronting both men. Princess Catherine, according to various interpretations circulating through royal circles, has also reportedly supported efforts to reinforce institutional stability during this transitional era. Though rarely associated publicly with palace power struggles, insiders describe Catherine as deeply aware of the emotional and reputational pressures surrounding the future monarchy her children are expected to inherit one day. Sources close to royal staff claim she understands better than most the delicate balancing act required to preserve public goodwill while avoiding open family warfare. And that balance, according to multiple reports, may explain why recent palace decisions have appeared so emotionally cold on the surface. The goal was not dramatic confrontation. It was controlled separation executed quietly enough to avoid triggering another public royal crisis. Yet the deeper tragedy for Andrew may be the realization that his situation is now being viewed through the lens of succession, rather than sympathy. According to royal observers, the closer William moves toward the center of monarchical power, the less tolerance exists for unresolved institutional liabilities tied to the previous era. Palace staff reportedly understand this shift clearly. Some insiders have even compared William's approach to the quiet disciplinary instincts once associated with Queen Elizabeth II herself, a method rooted not in emotional reaction, but in long-term preservation of the crown above all else. Problems were rarely confronted publicly. They were managed through silence, distance, protocol, and patience until the institution regained control of the narrative. That comparison has only intensified speculation that the Coronation program revisions were not isolated decisions made in haste, but part of a broader strategy unfolding gradually under the combined influence of Charles and William. And according to various interpretations from palace insiders, The most unsettling aspect of the entire operation is how methodical it appears to have become. Because once ceremonial erasure begins, insiders warn, it rarely stops at documents alone. Still, even among those supportive of the Crown's survival strategy, anxiety reportedly began spreading through palace corridors as the revisions moved closer to completion. Because while Andrew's public standing had undeniably collapsed, he remained a man who spent decades inside the monarchy's most protected inner circles. A royal who understood its habits, weaknesses, private tensions, and hidden fractures better than almost anyone alive. But even after the revisions were finalized, palace insiders feared the consequences of humiliating a royal who still possessed dangerous institutional knowledge. Inside the corridors of Buckingham Palace, the anxiety reportedly shifted almost immediately from celebration to containment. Because while Prince Andrew's ceremonial relevance may have been diminished, insiders warn that the Duke still understands decades of royal operations, private alliances, and internal vulnerabilities few outsiders could ever comprehend. That fear, according to multiple palace sources, began spreading quietly the moment revised coronation documents started circulating internally. At first, there had reportedly been a sense of institutional relief among certain senior officials, a belief that the monarchy had finally taken decisive action to protect its future from the shadows of unresolved scandal. But relief inside royal systems rarely lasts long, because the deeper reality confronting the palace was far more dangerous. Prince Andrew was not an outsider suddenly attacking the institution from beyond its walls. He was a man raised inside its most guarded machinery, a royal who spent decades observing how the crown protects itself, how narratives are managed, how crises are contained, and perhaps most importantly, where the monarchy remains vulnerable when pressure intensifies. Insiders now whisper that courtiers became increasingly concerned Andrew could retaliate indirectly if he felt completely cornered. Not through dramatic public warfare at first, but through carefully timed disclosures, private conversations, or subtle cooperation with figures hostile to the institution. The comparisons to Prince Harry's post-exit media campaigns reportedly surfaced almost immediately inside palace discussions. According to various interpretations from royal staff, the monarchy remains deeply traumatized by the damage caused when family tensions spilled into public interviews, memoirs, documentaries, and global media narratives over recent years. That experience allegedly reshaped how senior palace officials now assess internal threats. The fear is no longer limited to scandal itself. It is the fear of losing control over the story surrounding the scandal. And within that context, Prince Andrew's unique position reportedly created enormous anxiety behind closed doors. Unlike Harry, Andrew understood older layers of royal infrastructure that many modern royals barely experienced firsthand. Relationships with longtime courtiers, private financial sensitivities, historical tensions between royal households, and operational habits developed across decades inside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Sources familiar with internal communications claim palace security and media coordination teams began monitoring external narratives surrounding Andrew with unusual intensity following the coronation program controversy. Not because officials expected immediate retaliation, but because they feared what might happen if humiliation transformed into desperation. King Charles, according to insiders, has been especially determined to avoid open warfare within the family, despite growing pressure from those who believe harsher measures are necessary. Reports suggest the king remains psychologically torn between institutional duty and personal history, a conflict made even more painful by his ongoing health struggles since early 2024. Those close to palace operations claim Charles understands the catastrophic consequences another public royal implosion could have during such a fragile period for the monarchy. That is why the strategy surrounding Andrew allegedly remains rooted in containment rather than direct confrontation. Silence instead of spectacle. Distance instead of expulsion. Controlled erosion instead of open destruction. Yet that balancing act appears to be growing more difficult with each passing month. According to palace whispers, Andrew has become increasingly isolated from the monarchy's operational core. Invitations narrow. Access shrinks. Conversations become formal. Former allies grow cautious. Even routine interactions reportedly carry an undertone of tension now. As though everyone inside the institution understands something irreversible has already begun, but no one wishes to acknowledge it openly. Royal staff allegedly described the atmosphere as emotionally exhausting, a climate where every decision feels politically dangerous and every silence feels loaded with hidden meaning. The monarchy, meanwhile, continues attempting to project calm to the outside world. Publicly, the institution still emphasizes continuity, stability, and unity under Charles's reign. But behind that polished image, insiders claim palace officials are increasingly consumed by defensive calculations. What happens if Andrew speaks? What happens if private frustrations become public grievances? What happens if another insider narrative emerges at the exact moment the monarchy can least afford further instability? These questions, according to sources familiar with internal strategy discussions, now hang over Buckingham Palace like a gathering storm no one can fully predict. And perhaps that is what makes the entire crisis so unsettling for those watching the monarchy from within. Because the deeper issue is no longer simply about one disgraced royal or one altered ceremonial document. It is about what the institution is willing to do in order to survive an era defined by illness, distrust, succession anxiety, and relentless scrutiny. Yet the deeper tragedy of the crisis was not Andrew's humiliation, but what it revealed about the monarchy's survival instincts during Charles's uncertain reign. Royal historians often describe the House of Windsor as an institution built on controlled sacrifice. But according to reports emerging from palace circles, King Charles has now confronted the most painful version of that principle imaginable, choosing the long-term survival of the crown over the protection of his own brother. For all the public fascination surrounding royal ceremonies, titles, and palace intrigue, insiders often insist the monarchy survives through something far colder than glamour. It survives through discipline, through emotional restraint, through an unforgiving willingness to place institutional continuity above personal attachment when crisis threatens the stability of the crown itself. And according to various interpretations now emerging from royal commentators and former palace staff, King Charles may have reached the moment every monarch privately fears. The moment where family loyalty collides directly with the demands of history. Reports suggest the king has become increasingly emotionally conflicted behind closed doors as pressure surrounding Prince Andrew intensified over recent years. Those familiar with palace operations claim Charles never wanted his reign defined by internal family warfare, particularly while facing his own health struggles since early 2024. But the deeper problem confronting the monarch, insiders whisper, was that every attempt to preserve fragile family equilibrium allegedly carried growing risks for the institution itself. Public confidence, according to palace strategists, had become dangerously fragile in an era where royal legitimacy is constantly tested by scandal, distrust, and generational skepticism. And within that atmosphere, the monarchy's tolerance for unresolved controversy reportedly narrowed dramatically. The shadow of Queen Elizabeth II, according to royal observers, looms over every decision now unfolding inside Buckingham Palace. Not simply as Charles's mother, but as the architect of a monarchy built on duty over emotion, continuity over comfort, and the sacred preservation of the crown above all else. Former aides have long described Elizabeth II as someone who understood the brutal mathematics of monarchy better than almost anyone in modern history. Problems were never allowed to consume the institution itself. They were contained, absorbed, quietly managed over time through protocol, patience, and controlled sacrifice. And now, insiders claim Charles finds himself applying those same instincts under circumstances far more psychologically painful than the public fully realizes. Because at the heart of this crisis lies a devastating truth, Prince Andrew is not merely a controversial public figure to the king. He is his younger brother, a man tied to decades of shared history stretching back through childhood, grief, state duty, family fractures, and the enormous pressures of royal life lived beneath permanent scrutiny. That emotional bond, according to reports, allegedly made the palace's recent actions extraordinarily difficult for Charles personally. Yet royal commentators increasingly believe the monarch concluded there was no longer a sustainable path forward where Andrew's continued symbolic presence would not damage the institution's future trajectory. And within palace circles, the language surrounding that realization has reportedly become almost constitutional in tone. Insiders now whisper that the monarchy no longer views itself as a family business, but as what aides allegedly describe as a sacred trust held on behalf of the nation and future generations. That distinction matters enormously. Because once the crown begins prioritizing institutional survival above private loyalty, even blood relationships can become secondary to public legitimacy. Some royal commentators have gone so far as to describe Andrew's gradual removal from ceremonial relevance as a form of constitutional exile, not through legal decree, but through systematic separation from the monarchy's living narrative. At the same time, palace preparation for the future appears to be accelerating around one unavoidable reality: the next era of the monarchy will belong entirely to William and Catherine. Reports suggest more internal planning, public positioning, and long-term strategic thinking are now centered around protecting that transition from instability at all costs. In many ways, insiders claim the alleged program revisions symbolized far more than Andrew's decline. They symbolized the closing of one royal chapter and the controlled construction of another. A monarchy increasingly willing to sacrifice old emotional loyalties in order to secure its future under a new generation. And as those revised coronation programs quietly moved closer toward final publication, one chilling realization reportedly settled over Buckingham Palace with growing force. The separation unfolding around Prince Andrew no longer appeared temporary, negotiable, or symbolic. It was becoming permanent, woven directly into the institutional memory of the crown itself. And as revised coronation programs quietly moved toward publication, one final reality became painfully clear inside the palace walls. The revised programs reportedly looked almost identical to the originals. Same gold detailing, same ceremonial language, same sacred imagery tied to Westminster Abbey and the ancient covenant of monarchy. But one absence changed everything. Prince Andrew's name, once permanently woven into the ceremonial fabric of the modern royal family, had allegedly vanished into silence. According to palace insiders, the finalized reprints moved quietly through official channels with almost surgical precision. There were no public announcements, no explanations, no dramatic statements issued from Buckingham Palace. Staff members allegedly received direct instructions to avoid discussing the revisions under any circumstances, particularly with outside media contacts already circling the story. And perhaps that silence revealed more than any official statement ever could. Because within the House of Windsor, silence has long been one of the monarchy's most powerful weapons. Scandals fade into silence. Rivalries disappear into silence. And now, according to multiple reports, a royal prince's ceremonial legacy was being absorbed into that same cold institutional void. For Prince Andrew, the consequences reportedly stretched far beyond embarrassment. Royal historians increasingly believe the program revisions represented something much deeper: an effective removal from the monarchy's future historical narrative, not legally, not constitutionally, but symbolically. And inside an institution built almost entirely on symbolism, that distinction changes everything. Future generations reviewing official coronation records may never fully grasp how central Andrew once appeared within royal life during previous decades. Because according to various interpretations from palace commentators, the crown has now begun reshaping its own memory in real time. At the center of that transformation remains King Charles himself, a monarch reportedly exhausted by illness, institutional pressure, and the emotional burden of holding together a family increasingly fractured beneath the weight of modern scrutiny. Sources close to palace operations claim Charles understands his reign may ultimately be remembered less for expansion and celebration than for controlled stabilization during one of the monarchy's most uncertain eras since the abdication crisis. And within that context, insiders whisper that every recent decision has been guided by one overriding fear: preserving enough public trust for the crown to survive the transition into William's future reign. That future, according to royal observers, now appears to be forming with increasing clarity behind palace walls. Prince William is no longer viewed merely as the heir waiting patiently in the background. Reports suggest he has become one of the central architects shaping how the monarchy intends to navigate the decades ahead. Leaner, more disciplined, more emotionally distant from controversy, and insiders claim many of the recent institutional changes surrounding Andrew reflect a broader effort to build a monarchy capable of surviving public anger, generational skepticism, and relentless media exposure without repeating the mistakes of the past. Yet even as Buckingham Palace continues projecting calm, continuity and ceremonial stability to the outside world, insiders describe a royal institution still deeply unsettled beneath the surface. Relationships remain strained. Trust remains fragile. Conversations reportedly remain cautious and heavily controlled. Because despite all the carefully managed optics, the emotional cost of these decisions has not disappeared simply because official silence surrounds them. If anything, sources claim the silence has only intensified the psychological weight hanging over the family itself. And perhaps that is the final tragedy buried beneath the story of the revised coronation programs. Not simply that one royal figure fell from favor, but that the monarchy once again revealed the brutal calculus required for its own survival. Duty over blood, legacy over sentiment, institution over individual. Those principles, according to royal historians, have shaped the crown for centuries. But in moments like this, they stop feeling ceremonial and begin feeling deeply personal. Because in the end, Prince Andrew's disappearance from those records was never truly about paper, ink, or program formatting. It was about the monarchy sending a message to itself about the kind of future it believes it must now protect at any cost. And as those revised documents quietly settled into royal archives beside the preserved memories of kings, queens, coronations, and constitutional crises, stretching back generations, one chilling reality became impossible to ignore. Because within the unforgiving machinery of the British monarchy, history is not merely remembered. It is edited, protected, and, when necessary, rewritten in silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.